What's up everybody and welcome back to the series. I'm your host, Calvin Maclure. By this time, there had been several satellites sent aloft whose role was to study the lower Earth environment, equipped with various scientific payloads, and so by now, scientists had learned quite a lot. One environment that had thus far been neglected, save for the various lunar crafts in passing, was Earth's high space environment. When calculation errors back on Earth led to an insufficient Delta-V budget, the first high space dedicated satellite was placed in an unusable orbit. With the more powerful and capable Atlas Lyra at its disposal, HSDS-2 was launched with the objective of studying the upper portions of Earth's cosmic environment. Mounting tensions in the West and growing concerns in various portions of the globe meant that the United States had a need for growing intelligence capabilities. With Theia 1 and 2 already in orbit, the newly formed intelligence agency of the United States Air Force ordered another 3 satellites dubbed Theia 3, 4, and 5. More satellites meant additional data on more targets in less time. Theia 3 successfully entered into an unspecified orbit after its flight aboard Atlas Lyra. Theia 3 would spend the next 200 to 300 days in orbit documenting various targets of interest back on Earth. The specific targets remain undisclosed. Launching on back-to-back flights with less than a month in between, Theia 4 headed for its undisclosed orbit atop an Atlas Lyra. It was hoped that the ride aboard a civilian rocket without any specific markings would help conceal the true nature of the mission, but some amateur astronomers with keen eyes had a better sense of what was really happening. Following SECO, Theia 4 began its mission, and in 200 to 300 days' time, its return film capsule would be sent back home for analysis. When the space agency was first formed, it was given the mandate to conquer space for peacetime use and the betterment of Kerbal kind. With that mandate came the need to develop the necessary hardware, out of which came the Silver Brand and various Atlas boosters. Although the Atlas had been sufficient for Mercury, it lacked the capacity to place into orbit the agency's follow-up to the single-seater capsule, the larger and heavier two-seater capsule named Gemini, in reference to the third constellation of the zodiac with its twin stars Castor and Pollux. What the agency needed was a more capable booster, and with much at stake, the Air Force had just the thing. The military had been hard at work developing its own right into space and for various other purposes. The result was a new series of rockets called Titan. The Titan II GLV, or Gemini Launch Vehicle, was to be an expandable launch system derived from the Titan II ICBM. two-stage rocket, which used hyperbolic fuels for its engines, the first stage LR-87 and the second stage LR-91. All the Titan now needed to do was prove its worth, which it would do in a series of test flights. After two highly successful test flights, both of which reached orbit, the third and fourth test flights were ready to launch. Every launch brought with it a slew of additional data engineers back home used to improve on the design. The fourth and final test flight came less than a month after the third flight of the booster. Engineers at Martin Carrietta felt incredibly proud of their work, as did the military and, of course, the agency. With all 4 flights of the shiny new booster completely successful, it was now time for Project Gemini to officially commence.
Now T-minus 60 seconds and counting. T-minus 50.
Staggeringly complex. If it doesn't happen today, they have to postpone for 2 days. And then all the figures that they have are no good. They have to
T-minus 40 seconds and counting. During these final moments of the count, the pre-valves in the launch vehicle will open to permit the fuel and the oxidizer to come down towards the chamber of the vehicle. 30 seconds and counting.
You were talking about the computers. It seems to me the age of the computer had to arrive
T-minus
before the
20.
age of space.
Quick check on the blockhouse. All systems looking good. T-minus 15. T-minus 10. 9. 8. 7. 6. 5. 4. 3. 2. 1. 0.
The end of the decade was fast approaching, and with it, the target to land Kerbals on the moon. With a high degree of confidence in the new booster, astronauts would now ride the first Gemini capsule into space for the first time on a 2-day shakedown flight. Captain Joe Mitchel, who had flown the first manned orbital flight on Mercury 1, was in the hot seat as commander. Captain Nicolas Dezhnyov, the first of the second group of astronauts, was his wingman. Just like he had in his first flight into space, the first thing Mitchel did to test out the new capsule's maneuvering abilities was to track down the booster's spent second stage and follow it as though hunting it down. During the remainder of the flight, the crew performed additional scientific experiments, testing out various basic skills of what could be done while working in the microgravity environment and what it did to the Kerbal body. Two days after they had first lifted off from Cape Canaveral, Mitchel and Dezhnyov splashed down into the Pacific and concluded the first in a series of Gemini-Titan missions. Theia 5 lifted off the pad 4 months after its twin satellites Theia 3 and 4 had done before it. But after a successful performance from the first stage, the Lyra's second stage failed to ignite, and the mission was ultimately lost. Watching the telemetry closely and having a response team on standby for just such an occasion, recovery crews were sent downrange where engineers had expected the return capsule would most likely land. Not wanting any of its highly secret technology to fall into the wrong hands, the remainders of the ill-fated flight were recovered and not a trace was left behind. Just over 2 months after Gemini-Titan I had lifted off from the pad, Gemini-Titan II headed off to space for the second Gemini mission. Aboard was Captain Semyon Ford, who was on his second flight, and Captain Frank Lopez, a native of Los Alamos, New Mexico, and the second astronaut from Group 2 to fly. Whereas Gemini-Titan I was a shakedown mission more so to ensure all was well with the agency's new spacecraft, Gemini 2 was the real deal. The 3-day mission's objectives began almost the very second the capsule separated from its booster. After the pirates had blown the two crafts free from one another, Ford took control of his spacecraft and began to test out the feasibility of having two crafts in close proximity to each other, performing something mission planners and engineers back home called station keeping. Whether or not this could be achieved was still unknown, but proving it out was necessary if Kerbals were going to get to the moon. Later missions would prove out if two crafts could dock together in space following a maneuver called rendezvous, after the French expression referring to a planned meeting between two or more parties at a specific time and place. Once the cosmic ballet had been completed, to the satisfaction of crews back home, Gemini 2 prepared itself for the main reason it had come to space.
So we just had word from Houston. We're ready to have you get out whenever you're ready.
Hold on, I'm rolling to the right now. Under my own influence. It's like a turbo bus, Jim. It is. Not gonna bust the spacecraft. Not gonna back down now. I'm under my own control. Okay, I'm turning over. I feel like $1 million. Turn back to you. I'm right by the stub antenna now. Let me get the I ought to get some tremendous pictures. Okay, I think I've exhausted my air now. No, I think you're doing fine. What I'd like to do is get all the way out here and get a picture of the whole spacecraft. I don't see us doing that. Yeah, I noticed that. You can't seem to get far enough away. No.
Texas, remote your air to ground. California, go local.
I'm coming back down on the space station. Listen, it's all the difference in the world with this yacht.
Frank Lopez, engineer, test pilot, graduate of West Point, and holder of a doctorate in aerospace engineering from MIT, was now also a spacewalker, and the first ever Kerbal to do so. After just 12.5 minutes spent in the confines of his own personal spacecraft, Lopez was ordered back in to the Gemini capsule. The crew spent the remainder of the 3-day flight performing a series of new experiments scientists, doctors, and engineers back home had devised for them to do. At mission's end, Gemini 2 had proved out the feasibility of station keeping. EVA pushed the endurance record to 3 days and paved the way for far more daring feats to be attempted in upcoming missions. That's gonna do it for this episode. I really hope you enjoyed it. As always, do please like and subscribe, as it does help the channel to grow. I always enjoy reading what your thoughts on the episode and the series as a whole are, so feel free to leave a comment below. Be sure to stay tuned, as there's much more to follow. I'm Calvin Maclure, and I'll see you next time.